What are we talking about today? Well, what if, this is the phenomena that happens in the enterprise. What goes on? You go and you build this amazing system. It handles it's resilient, it's beefy, it's able to handle the load. You've got all your stuff running on it. You migrate onto it, live traffic, it's growing in volume, more customers are buying into it. And then your manager walks into your office and says, I need you to run a data warehousing analysis query. So we've got all this rock solid data flowing through the system, transactions left and right. Now I need a report to run on what happened last month. You're like, well, that's different. Okay, I've written all the SQL action, all the operations to support the purchasing, the order deliveries, whatever you're solving. But then you had this deal where now I need to go write some 3-page analytical query. And it's like, well, that may take a lot of work. There may be, the risk is there may be some full table scans in there. If you got to go analyze the data, you start thinking about things like, I need to start using some of those group by queries because there's a lot of analytical functions, standard deviations, averages, mins, max, whatever. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The functions you've got in SQL are fantastic. I need to run this analytical query. If you're running on a distributed system, is that the best plan for you? Let's look at this. Let's look at this. Let me put it up here. Let's do it like this here. Okay, so let's pick some black. I need to pick a. I need to let's. Trying to get the right brush here. I haven't been on my tablet in a while. Okay. Okay, let's clear this layer out. Okay. Okay, clear. Okay. Okay, so the idea is, you've built this system, and you've got, you've got a few nodes here on the West Coast. You got a couple on the East Coast. Maybe there's a couple in the Central. They're all kind of linked together. This is your resilient cluster. They can talk to each other. They're able to take the load and spread it across the enterprise. You've kind of broken it out into regions. Maybe you're using the amazing ability of multi-region, for example. So you've got, some of the data is over here. So let's go here. Okay. You've got a chunk of data here, but then you've got a chunk of data here. And let's pick, you got chunks of data here. Remember, these are your distributed ranges are spread all over the place, okay? Because you've got, you may have geographically based data. So people are trying to access and reach. So, you have this phenomena where you have, there's customers on their phones here, and they're connecting to this part, okay? But then there's customers over here. They link into this. And so the customers on the West Coast talk to the data that's on the West Coast, and the customers on the East Coast are talking to the data that's on the East Coast. So all this stuff from an operational perspective makes a lot of sense. So you're sitting there interacting, and you're able to provide the fact that you have this regional data that you're leveraging CockroachDB's multi-region support makes it easy for you to offer low latency stuff for the geographically based data. And so that's really handy and convenient. So we can do all that. And then you come along and say, I need to do an analytical query. I need to do an aggregate, some kind of a report where I want to look at what's everything that happened last month. Okay. So I'm going to analyze all the data. Well, the data is spread out. So if you come in here and you've got your SQL query that you're writing, that's my SQL query. Your SQL query you're going to write, it needs to go everywhere. It needs to access everything. What do you think the cost is going to be for it to go out to all those different ranges to get the data when you write the select statement that does that? Well, it's going to be a bit of a load on the system. And is it anything that you priced into the size of your cluster? Is your cluster built to handle that? In truth, we run into this all the time in monolithic systems because it's absolutely the database becomes your source of truth, and so use it for operational stuff, use it for reporting stuff. But the fact that in a traditional sense, the database server is sitting in one place in a single data center. We don't think a lot of it because we go to the same place to do all of this. But if your phenomena is that this is your story, we need to put a little more forethought into it because it's a bit of a trick. Okay. Well, we do have a solution for that, and for that, we need a new diagram. So the concept is I can build, any cluster that I want. Let's imagine I've got some kind of 3-node cluster. This is my Cockroach. This is my production cluster. I have an Apple pencil that makes this not look like kindergarten drawings, except there's an upgrade to my iPad. So now this is my pen. So you build a cluster, whatever, maybe a 5-node cluster, that kind of thing. It's all interactive, and these nodes can be anywhere. Okay, they can be spread around the country, as we were looking at on the previous diagram. But what I'm doing is a different thing. I'm running a different type of workload to do this analysis. It would be really convenient what if I could have all of that data, or maybe the data I'm interested in, but on a different cluster, maybe a cluster of one. And so this is sort of a warehouse. What if I could have a warehouse cluster that's located somewhere else? Maybe this warehouse, it doesn't need to be up all the time. It does not need resilience. It does not need to be highly available to access from the West Coast and the East Coast with zone level survivability. I don't need any of that. I just want what's on the production thing over here in my alternate cluster. I want to be able to basically, okay, I want to clone a specific set of data from the production system to my warehouse. Okay. And then I will go take that and use. And that's where I can go run my SQL query that's, I don't know, 10 pages long, or I can go write all the reports that I want to over there. And I'll know, because I'm operating on a clone copy of the data. The clone copy could be, for all I know, 12 hours old. Who knows? A minute old, 5 minutes old, an hour, 12 hours. What I need is, I sort of want an automated copy of the data from production routed into my warehouse cluster so that I can do an isolated workload on it. Well, your mind may already be spinning at the idea of, wait a minute, I've heard of a tool that does that, or I know a handful of tools that does that. There's all kinds of stuff we can go to the market and find to help us do this kind of thing. But guess what? You don't necessarily have to reach for an off-the-shelf product. You don't have to go buy something else. This is a first-class tool with CockroachDB. And it's something called, it's a tool that we have here. Let's pick the purple. It's called logical data replication. And we're going to do a little lab that uses that as logical data replication for us. And essentially it lets us, it's on a per table basis. So we can sit there and say, I want a copy of that table. I want a copy of that table. I want a copy of that table. And I want it live streamed, in a sense, to my warehouse cluster. That's all I want. And then I'll go use that other cluster as I need it. This is definitely I have seen systems that are like we one time used this off the shelf. I don't want to say ticketing system. It was a system for provisioning circuits. Okay. This is a contract I worked on 20 some odd years ago. And we used a particular tool. It had trouble ticketing. It had provisioning. This was a pretty heavy tool. It had been in the market for a long time. The schema had 800 tables. I mean, that's crazy. So, we didn't, suffice it to say, whatever your schema is in production, you need all the tables for your production system. For this data warehouse, maybe you only need a subset of them. Maybe you only need 10 of those 200 tables that you have, or 15, whatever you have. You can pick and choose the granularity of what you want to clone over to the thing. So let's dive in and check it out. In fact, let's go bump it. Let's do this. Okay. So what happens if I start shrinking? Does that make it look any better? I don't know. Okay. Doesn't seem to. Okay. All right. Let's go full speed ahead. So build analytics on a warehouse replica. Now we're going to use, by the way, if this is here, let's just go ahead and do it here. Basically, in this system, we have two different nodes. We have an operations node, and we have a shell open on the operation side, and we have a warehouse node. So this is basically our source cluster and has a preloaded data set. It's got a bookly.book table. So in this paradigm, we're talking about basically an online bookstore. The warehouse is going to be our destination for being able to do whatever analytics that we want. We're going to kick it off by, on the operations side of thing, we're going to go right into CockroachDB using SQL Shell. And let's go check out what the state of the system is. I said, give me a look at, show me all the databases that we have. And the one that we're interested in is this Bookly database, okay? And I said, just go count how many entries are in the bookly.book table. And it says there's 100,000 rows in there. That's how many books are in this one. Now, this is just test data, just a sort of a sample set. You know, a real production system could have 10, a million, 10 million, 100 million rows, that kind of stuff. But we just want to kind of play around with the idea. The first thing to do in CockroachDB, if we want to use logical data replication, is we have to enable the range feeds, okay? That's a cluster level setting that only needs to happen one time, and it needs to be enabled there on the source side, okay? So this is a built-in feature inside our low-level KV store. In case you didn't know it, part of where CockroachDB gets its power is that the underlying physical data store is actually a KV store, keys and values. And the values are essentially the columns of the table. And the K is very similar to the primary key. Let's get back to this thing. Why don't I put me over here to the right so you can see what I'm doing? How about that? Okay. So I've enabled range feeds, and this is a feature built in deep in the heart of CockroachDB. So let's go over to the warehouse side of things. You can just imagine this is a totally different server located somewhere else, and I'm going to go into its CockroachDB. So I have two different clusters running in my enterprise. In the destination warehouse, I need to create a database. The LDR, logical data replication, will not create a whole new database. I need to create essentially an empty database to target that at. And then the thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to pull this out so we could look at it a little closer, is I'm going to create what's called an external connection source. And if you look at it, this looks a lot like a JDBC connection string. Okay, it says we're going to use Postgres protocol. It's pointing us to the source server. In this case, I'm just pointing to a single machine because this is a very simplistic way to get the concept across. But normally that would be the load balancer for your source cluster, and then its default port. And I'm also pointing it to a specific database. And also in this situation, I have security disabled. Now in production, you should not be running in an unsecured environment. In a real production environment, your operation system should be secured and your warehouse cluster should also be secured, okay? Let me scooch this back over here to the right, and then I'm going to run that, okay? So that will define, for the warehouse side, it defines what's called the source connection. That's just a logical name that we now have a handle on. And then here's where the gold is, this part right here. I'm going to go ahead and run it so it can get started. And I'll highlight it here. This is of just a form of SQL. Create logically replicated table bookly.book. So it is saying, I want you to make right here a bookly.book table. And I want it to be based, you're going to say, where does that come from? It comes from table bookly.book. So right there, the target name of the table and the source name of the table are both separately specified. And then it's saying, where does this table come from? It comes from external source. That's the logical name we picked up here, okay? And this says it's unidirectional. So far, the stream is only going this way, production to warehouse. And what it's essentially done is it's launched a job, okay? So there's now a background job going. Now I can just type show jobs, but I'm actually going to flange down and say, the show commands are our SQL handles to look at the internals of what's happening with CockroachDB. So we're going to select on it and look for anything that mentions that book table. So we can find that specific job. And you'll notice that the job that it said that it launched earlier is this job. We could have also just used the job ID as the match. But it says this is a logical replication stream. It's running. It started. Now let's go run and just check on the status of things. Okay, so I first said show tables from Bookly, show me all the tables, and it did that. That's what it has right here. So it has this book table now that's been created by the command. And then this has to do with some of the syncing and stuff that it does to maintain the stream. The next command was show columns from bookly.book. And with that, it gave me the details of the table. Okay. And then finally, I said do a select count star. And so right here, I can see the number of book rows is 100,000. So it's basically generated the feed, created the table, and now it's synced up. All right, now here's what we're going to do. So now we have this data. I mean, I can just start going, select star from bookly.book, limit, 100. I can do something like that. These are some of these fantastic books that, you ought to read. Those Child Shake, or hey, everyone wants to read Polynesian Fact Stack. We have a tool that lets us auto generate some of this content. So it's kind of entertaining what it does. But before I'm going to run any kind of analytical query, let's imagine I did the analysis on what would make for a good index. So I decided to create a covering index. Create index if not exists on Bookly. Well, I need to correct this. This is actually a composite index. It's indexed on two columns. It doesn't have any uh, a covering index has a storing clause, which also adds additional information to the index that can save you from having to go and join back to the original table. All right. So I'm telling it to go make me an index that's going to help service. Now you can go look for, this is not a command to run here. This is just showing us the structure of the table. So now I've created an index and I can start writing these kind of, crazy queries that I'm sure you've seen before. This is something I went and played around with Chat GPT to help me build some of these. And I was like, well, I want some kind of a monthly catalog growth plus price stats by format query. And it said, okay, let's go to town with that. So this report is sitting there looking at sales stats, published date stats. And so it goes month by month. So it goes month by month, format by format. That's what the group by does. So you can see in the month of January in 2020, the four formats we had 697 new audiobooks, 734 ebooks, 703 hardcover books, and 695 paperback books. That's the count. It's also computing for me in each of those categories. What was the average price of those books? What was the minimum, the maximum, and what's the standard deviation? Why not? So supposedly this report makes sense to some business analysts. You can go take it back there. This lab exercise has some more reports you can go run. But what's cool about all this, I can run just some all crazy. What's this one? Top audiobook authors for a rolling 12-month report. So, if I look here, some of these you have to stop and look and think, what is this? This is I don't know if I could even parse what this thing is doing. It's pretty detailed. I'm sure if I could go to Chat GPT and say, Chat GPT, help me comprehend this query. I mean, that's a handy usage there. Okay, so let's switch over to here. Boop. Okay, so basically what this is letting me do, it's letting me go and remember all these select statements are running. Remember the terminal that we're in, it may be hard to see on your screen, but this is the warehouse cluster that I'm doing all this. I could have run these queries in the operations thing, but the point is I didn't want to. I wanted to isolate the workload and confine it to a different cluster. The other thing I can do is I could sit there and insert new data. So let's see here if I can Let's see. There we go. Okay, what I want to do is now, okay, I'm over here. I'm back in operations. And I'm going to go do an insert statement. I'm going to insert a whole new book called Learning CockroachDB for $39.99, written by Mr. J. Doe himself, or Mrs. J. Doe. We don't, John or Jane Doe. And it's an ebook. So I'm going to insert that. And I'm going to, over here, let's do a select count star from bookly.book. Now there's 100,001. So I can do select star from bookly.book where title like cockroach. Let me put a % on both sides just to capture that thing. Okay, and here I can see it. It was injected. So it was injected on the operations side. It got over to the warehouse side pretty quickly. And what's important is automatically, and it's synced up. And guess what happened? If I go run that same report is not, wait a minute, that was a different report that we looked at. This was top audio. Here, I'm going to insert, let's insert an audio version. Okay, I'm going to insert the audio version. Now I'm going to let's select count star from bookly.book. Select star from bookly.book where title like % cockroach. All right, let's see that one come through. Okay, so now there's both. You can get the ebook version or you can get the audiobook version, whatever your favorite one is. And notice it was published today on October 2nd. Now, if I go run that top audiobook authors thing again, for the month of October, my top audiobook author is J. Doe. Hey, how about that? So my report is now updated and complete. So this is where we got to do, let's see here. Let me remove this and let me add this. Okay, so this is what we get to do with using the thing. Essentially, we're able to insert data in production. It would now that we have this ongoing stream working, we can see the stream propagating to the warehouse. We inserted new data. We're able to sit there and run our warehouse query again and see it percolate within minutes. Okay. What's this? This live stream's been running for like 30 minutes total. So we're able to stand up. We have a production cluster. We have a warehouse cluster. We're able to set up a one-directional link. Now, I didn't show it here, but if you actually go and make updates on the warehouse side, they do not travel to the other side. So let's say if I did this, oops. Okay, let me select the right layer. Okay. If I do this, what I have to do is I need to do all this and say, nope, not happening. So it's a unidirectional. So you have the ability to create both bidirectional or unidirectional. The whole thing is what can you do with this? We used it for workload isolation here, but there's actually a lot of different parameters, a lot of different ways. And on a future episode of SelectStar, I'm going to demonstrate how we can use it where a common paradigm we need to solve is maybe you have a production load, but you have a test bed that you would like to test against the same traffic that's coming into your production system. And this makes for a great opportunity. Now, I want to let you know that we have a if you're interested in some of this stuff, the story of Cockroach, we do have a nice little training environment with a lot of classes. Modules are pretty active right now. If you can check out the QR code, you can go to university.cockroachlabs.com and see all the offerings that we have. The thing that we just demonstrated is one piece of our logical data replication course that we're producing right now that hopefully will be ready soon. So you may want to check that out. What is that?
If you're enjoying the show about the database you just can't kill, then give it a big thumbs up. and share it with a friend.
Now, don't forget, I want you to be sure to smash the like button if you got value out of this show, and hit the subscribe button. That way you can catch the next episode when we put out another one, because we've got more content coming. And that way you can figure out how to go take the database you just can't kill and put it to good use.
This episode is over, but your learning has just begun. Visit CockroachLabs.com to find all kinds of content to expand your knowledge.